Pursuant to section 841411 of the Nebraska statutes, the notice of this meeting was given on July 10th, 2020. This meeting will convene at 6:30 p.m. and visitors may obtain a request to be heard form from staff for any presentation they may have for the meeting. In accordance with policy, the request to be heard forms must be submitted to the secretary within the first 5 minutes of the board meeting in order to be heard at this meeting. Agenda items are subject to reordering at the discretion of the board president. Please attend the entire board meeting to make sure you can hear any discussion. Thank you.
Hello, ladies. How y'all doing? I was just telling them good job what you're doing, okay? I'm going to connect with all of you, I promise, okay?
All right, folks, it is 6:30, and we are ready to begin. Pursuant to section 841411 of the Nebraska statutes, the next regular board meeting of Douglas County School District 0001 and Board of Educational Service Unit number 19 will be held on Monday, August 3rd, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. in the board meeting room of the Teacher Administrative Center, 3215 Cummins Street. The agenda will be kept current and available for public inspection in the office of the Secretary of the Board of Education at the Administrative Building during regular working hours. Pursuant to section 841412 of the Nebraska statutes, the public is hereby informed that a current copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is posted here in the board meeting room on the north wall. I strongly request that everyone please wear your face mask and cover your nose as well as your mouth, as well as when you're sitting down and speaking. So if you do get a chance to speak for public comment, please wear your face mask for the safety of yourself and others. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Vice President Dr. Holman will lead us in the OPS vision and mission statement.
First, our vision. Every student, every day, prepare for success. In our mission, Omaha Public Schools prepares all students to excel in college, career, and life.
Mr. Ray, roll call, please.
Cassidy,
Here.
Godding,
Present.
Holman,
Present.
Cracky,
Here.
Perlman,
Here.
Ryan,
Present.
Smith,
Here.
Snipe,
Present.
Snow.
Here.
9 present.
Thank you. We'll start with our Board and Superintendent Communications with our Treasurer's Report. Mr. Robbins.
President Snow, Vice President Holman, members of the board, Superintendent Logan. The financial statements for the period ended May 31st, 2020 have been finalized and submitted for your review.
Thank you. Colleagues, if you have any questions or anything, please direct them to Dr. Logan and Mr. Robbins. Up next, Dr. Logan.
Good evening, President Snow, members of the board, and those here in attendance and those watching the streaming at home. It's good to see everyone back here at the TAC boardroom, healthy, well, wearing their facial coverings and socially distanced. I am also pleased to see the adjustments our district operations team has made to the boardroom to ensure we're adhering to local and national safety guidelines, including distancing the seating for members of the public. As we prepare for a safe and responsible return to school, tonight members of our district administration will brief the board on additional planning for a safe and responsible return to school. The team will cover student attendance, ongoing partnership with our families, and high expectations for at-home learning, the implementation of health and safety measures, and our planned considerations for athletics and extracurricular activities. Our team continues to diligently work through details of the plan to ensure we are ready to welcome students and staff back in a safe and secure environment. To ensure that more members of our community were informed, today I recorded a safe and responsible return to school interview in Spanish that will play on Radio Lobo on Wednesday. Será una entrevista en español el miércoles en el Radio Lobo, no sé la hora, pero mañana lo voy a poner en mi in Twitter. We continue to receive a steady flow of questions and input from our parents and the community. The feedback has been helpful, and we answer as quickly as we are able to. This past week, we hosted a town hall meeting for our staff and a Facebook Live event for our families. Both of our online events were designed to offer staff and families a live forum to ask questions about our school reopening plan. The Facebook Live event was well attended and reached many viewers last Thursday. For families who are unable to join us, the recorded session can be accessed from our Facebook page. As we prepare to return, we have many families who would like a full remote learning option. For students with specific needs or medical concerns, we continue to accept applications for remote learning this fall. Interested families can email remote.learning@ops.org. As we make necessary adjustments to ensure we have an adequate number of staff for both in-person and virtual learning, student placement in remote learning will be subject to need and availability. Remote learning schedules will align with the current pacing for traditional in-person learning following the Family 3-2 model. All remote learning placements will remain in effect for 1 semester. At the conclusion of remote learning, students are guaranteed placement back in their former school or home attendance school per the student assignment plan. This week, we will restart our weekly updates to staff and families to ensure we are sharing the most recent information as details are finalized. We ask that families please check your email often to be sure you are receiving the most up-to-date information. The Enrollment Fair started last week, and I want to thank the team. It's been a little bit warm, so I want to thank the team. I think we may have to move inside a few days coming up here. I appreciate all the people because they really are troopers. As part of our normal back-to-school practice, we began hosting our annual Enrollment Fair last Tuesday, July 7th. The fair is open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. until noon and will run until August. This year's fair is set up as a drive-through enrollment fair in the parking lot outside TAC here at 32nd and Cumming Street. You likely saw the tents outside. The fair is designed to assist families who are new to our school district or who have a change of address and need to update their information. Families with internet access also have the option of enrolling their students online or updating their information online. I need to thank Pat Pope and Brian Dunn and their team for getting that done. They did a great job. Families with questions about the fair can always call our student placement office. Details can be found on our website at ops.org. Congratulations are in order for Eric Sager-Pera of Omaha Central High School for being recognized by Nebraska's governor for earning a top score on his college entrance exam. Sager-Pera was one of 44 students in the state of Nebraska to earn this recognition. North High graduate L.J. McFall for receiving the North High Teachers Award, the Macmillan Magnet Staff Scholarship, and the Harley Collings Alexander Scholarship. Rachel Ahrens of Northwest High for earning the 2020 Air Force Association Rolls-Royce National Aerospace STEM Teacher of the Year. And to the Florence Elementary Kindness Crew, who were featured right here on this board and this boardroom, for being selected the You Are Not Alone School of the Year. Kudos to all for a job well done. I want to acknowledge the students and recent alumni who organized this weekend's rally near Central High School. Many are in attendance here this evening. Some of the students involved with the event reached out to me directly, and I want them to know that first, you are heard. We hear your voices, we hear your concerns. You make us OPS proud. When we see you using your voices as instruments to encourage and to raise issues important to you, we are proud. Third, you have a First Amendment right to use your voice. We've taught you this in our classrooms, and we appreciate watching you responsibly and respectfully use what you've learned. As it goes for safety, for the past 2 years, our school district has prioritized school safety. We've done this intently and purposefully. We started through training the entire district to follow one standardized protocol. We built proactive relationships and partnerships across the city and at the state. Last year, we were able to meet in person. We held the district's first ever safety summit, attended by more than 500 folks, to include local and state law enforcement, our mayor and police chief, all focused on exploring best practices in keeping our schools safe. Those relationships have helped us quickly identify areas of concern and provide supports to students and families in need. To the students here and those watching at home, safety and support are not binary choices. We appreciate you bringing your voice here today so that we can hear about your qualitative experiences, especially as they compare to the quantitative numbers. We look forward to the continuing dialogue with students and community members. As a person who started my public school experience in 1967 in kindergarten until today, I have seen a lot of, you like the way I emphasize that? 1967. It's a long time ago. I have seen a lot of changes, some fast, some gradual, and have some observations that continue to need our collective efforts so that all students feel known, loved, and inspired at school to become the very best version of themselves. And wherever we come out on issues, we are still here to support you and appreciate you using your voice. Our students are attending school in challenging times, and it's ultimately our obligation to ensure they they are, not just that they are safe, but they feel safe and cared for at school. At the same time, we must have the necessary structure and supports to deliver on that obligation. We continue to do the work necessary and maintain the necessary relationships to keep our schools safe. Mr. Snow, this concludes my remarks this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Logan. Moving on to board members. Any comments? Ms. Ryan.
I want to address the students in their rally this weekend and just reiterate what Dr. Logan said, and that I am incredibly proud of all of you that have done this work. And I have heard so many great things about your organizations and how you've been researching and that you guys know everything that you're talking about. And I just want to say just how incredibly impressed I am of you, and that you do have allies on this board. You have allies who are your teachers and administrators, and we're listening. Okay, so you guys can contact me whenever you want, and I have your backs. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. All righty. No? Okay. All righty. The next item on our agenda is public comment. Okay, so we have 24 public comment forms. When I call your name, I'll also call the person behind you, so they're ready to step up to the mic, so we can try to meet our hour.
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Cronin.
At 5 minutes each, we're likely to go over, so I'd ask that I'd make a motion to suspend board policy as it relates to the 5 minute, well, not the 5 minute, but the 60-minute limit on public comment tonight.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. Cronin to suspend board policy, if I'm correct, 7,000? By Mr. Cronin, second by Ms. Cracky. Discussion? All right. Mr. Ray, roll call, please.
Cracky.
Aye.
Perlman.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Snipe.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Goding.
Aye.
Holman.
Aye.
9-9.
Motion carries. All right. So, everybody gets to speak. Good news. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to speak. Of the 24 speakers that have submitted a request to speak form, Mr. Ray will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you are in need of an interpreter, please let Mr. Ray know and one will be provided for you. If the subject of your public comment is related to a particular student or staff member, we ask that you do not mention the student or staff member by name, and instead provide those details to Mr. Ray, and he will provide that to the Board of Education. If you do not get an opportunity to speak and would like to submit any written commentary, please provide it to Mr. Ray, and he will make sure each board member gets a copy. As a reminder, we ask that you please spell your name and state your address before you begin your public comment. It is now 6:43, and our first speaker is Larry Storr.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Perlman, for your motion. I'm sorry, am I supposed to give my address? 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha 68132. I'm here tonight. I think I've just said it. I'd like to request a total refund of my property taxes that I've paid since 1971, because you folks, I believe, have failed. You failed us and you failed the students. I don't think they've gotten the education that they're supposed to have gotten. They obviously are operating currently on some pretty far-fetched ideas about slavery, about our history, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know where they get their information, because apparently it's a totally different curriculum idea of history that I was ever taught and that I've ever read in my 77 years, which I might add, over those number of years, you must have learned something more than what some of these young people have learned, and maybe they're not even graduated yet, or they graduated just last year. They're not a voting age yet. They haven't experienced a lot of things, so maybe they need another 50 years of life experience to understand that what they're doing is good, but it's not necessarily right. It's not necessarily true. And I'd like to point out that this whole concept of Black Lives Matters, if you do your research, it really is a Marxist organization. Now, if these young people know what that is, I'd be very surprised. Because that is an organization that aims to, and always has in the past, be a bad actor. A bad actor for the various countries. Various countries have gone under to the principles and ideals of Marxism. That fist in the air, my friends, is a Marxist symbol. It says, we will take over. We're in power, not you. Well, I'm sorry, that's not, our country doesn't work that way, okay? Our country is a republic. We elected you people from the top on down to the school board, and now I'd like to have some people fired because they failed in their mission of educating our young people. Now, one of the practices that Marxism likes to do is, this might offend some people, but they like to pick out people that they consider useful idiots that will believe their dogma, their propaganda, that I'm a racist, that I'm a hater, that I don't like Cheryl Logan and I don't like Tracy, et cetera, et cetera. But they're the ones too that'll take you out to Memorial Park, and when we have people of color speaking to us in the language that we need to be spoke to, they don't respect those people either. And those are people of color. Did you forget about them? They had some pretty good words to say that I like. There's a lot of people in the past too. I heard something the other day by Mr. Glenn Beck that I didn't know. But in the Library of Congress, Thomas Jefferson had buried in a box of his the first draft of the Constitution and their discussions about slavery. And the fact of the matter is, there were 13 colonies. They wanted to abolish slavery, ladies and gentlemen, but 2 colonies, South Carolina was one of them, said, no, we won't sign your document.
1 minute.
Because we're going to keep slavery. So don't blame me. Don't blame the people out there. We didn't start it. We didn't cause it. I think, you go back to when Noah got off the boat, family started. Somehow way back there, slavery started because not everybody could be the captain of the boat. Not everybody can be the superintendent of schools. Somebody has to be the student. Fact of life. Grow up and accept
30
freedom.
seconds.
I'm sorry, we have a policy against.
And refund my taxes.
And that's not permitted here.
Next, Mike, please. Please refrain from pausing. Thank you, Mr. Storr. Our next speaker is Adam Gottschall.
What the hell is that?
Good evening, everybody. I'm a little nervous, so please, excuse that. First of all, I want to say thank you to Ms. Luann Goding and Ms. Kamara Snight for being the only 2 people that responded to my email. I emailed everybody sitting here, so and only 2 responses, so thank you for that. Sorry, let me catch my breath first. Wearing a mask is hard because I have COPD, but anyway. I'm first of all a father and a husband, as well as a veteran of the United States military. And since I didn't have time to go home and change, I must make a disclaimer that I do not represent the post office in any way, shape, or form. I just so happen to be a mail carrier for my job. Anyway, I must say that this experience has been very, very frustrating, to say the least, okay? My child is a special education child who does not fall under the plan, I guess, of the 5-day curriculum, and he's going to continue to follow further and further behind. I have, he's a smart kid, but I have some copies of his IEP here that my wife sent me. And basically, I'm just going to give you kind of the gist of this, is he's supposed to get speech services 30 minutes at a time, 4 times per week. Resources 90 minutes, 5 times a week, and OT services are 8 times a year, okay? He is a hands-on learner. I cannot express that enough, okay? So taking him out of the classroom is completely counterproductive and against his right to be in a classroom setting, okay? So I honestly think that, the Supreme Court case of Brown versus Education really needs to be researched and discussed, because that basically guarantees your right to an education and your right to a fair education, okay? I'm not going to get into the whole gist of it. That's what it basically is. So, as a parent, you don't see me here at the board meetings very much because I work a full-time job, I own a side business, and, I'm also running for Metro Board right now, so I'm running for, for an office, and so I just don't have really all that much time. I come up here to, express my concerns because, it's my experience with this district has been very disappointing and frustrating. It honestly is. I'm not going to point anybody out, name any names, do any of that kind of stuff, but we have a lot of work to do, okay? And I mean a lot of work to basically make everybody feel included, in decision making, and make everybody feel like they're getting a quality education. If you think we're getting a quality education, you're wrong. You're just flat out wrong. Look at how we stand on the world stage. We suck, honestly. We really do. Look up the statistics. They're out there, So, and my kid, it's frustrating when my kid is going to sit there and fall further and further and further behind because certain people around here, some of you sitting in this room, want to be a bunch of tyrants and tell me how to raise my child and what their education is supposed to look like. That's all I have. Have a good evening.
Can you guys please refrain from clapping? I appreciate it. Our next speaker is Barbara Gard. Thank you.
Is it okay if I close this?
Yes, ma'am. And you can actually pull that mic closer to you so we can hear you better.
Oh,
Perfect.
this one?
Yes, ma'am.
I definitely need to do that. I will try to speak up, and hopefully you can hear me. My name is Barbara Gard, B-A-R-B-A-R-A, last name Gard, G-A-R-D. My physical home address is 4719 Curtis Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska, 68104. Just a little bit of my background. I have a bachelor's degree in elementary education from Cal State Los Angeles. I have a master's degree in educational administration with a K-12 endorsement from UNO. I have taught everything from preschool through college level in California, in Nebraska, and overseas. So that's basically my background. First of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for your service to the students in the Omaha Public School District. You have a thankless job. You hear every complaint. You do not hear enough thank yous. So I want to thank you for your willingness to serve, to invest your time, your talent, to do what you think is best for the students in OPS. Okay? But I have to be honest with you. I have no idea who put together this attendance plan, talking about some students going 2 days a week, some 3 days a week. I don't know who did it. So there is no personal attack here intended against anybody. but whoever did it obviously does not have experience in teaching at the lower elementary level. The idea of young children being in school only 2 days a week and then the rest of the time they're at home doing whatever is a terrible, terrible mistake. Children at that level, they need positive reinforcement. A good example, when I was teaching kindergarten, I taught a very simple concept. You know, this is the letter A, this is what it looks like, this is what it sounds like. And I taught that on Monday. I had to teach it again on Tuesday. I had to teach it again on Wednesday. I had to teach it again on Thursday. I had to teach it again on Friday. And these are not kids who don't have any ability. These are smart kids. But their level of brain development is such. And guess what? They came back Monday the following week and they'd forgotten most of what they had learned, if not all of it. But I taught it again, and little by little the concept sank in and they were able to learn the basic steps so that they would be ready to learn how to read, so they would be ready to learn how to write. And if you have children going to school only 2 days a week or only 3 days a week, they will not get that level of reinforcement that they need if you want them to learn how to read, if you want them to learn basic math. You have to repeat and repeat and repeat and have lots and lots and lots and lots of practice. You need to have the interaction between student and teacher, as well as between student and student. You need to have them in the classroom 5 days a week so that there is somebody there who can help them, that they can raise their hand and ask a question. If they don't understand, they need somebody who can be right there, right then, to help them get that level of understanding they need so they can go on without losing what they have. And I am so afraid of what will happen to our children if you follow through on this plan. Please think about it before you do such a thing, because you can say, well, the rest of the time they're learning at home. Oh, really? No, they probably aren't. They may be, maybe parents are going to try and sit down with them, but what about single parents? They have to work. They can't be home with their children. Who's going to supervise them? Who is going to give them that input? And it isn't just the younger children who need to be there 5 days a week. The older students, they need the same level of interaction. You need to lay that foundation, and then you need to build on it day by day by day by day by day, and that's how they learn. You may not be aware of it.
1 minute.
Approximately 1/4 of what children learn, they will get from the textbook or the computer or the iPad or whatever they're using. 3/4 of what they learn is going to be from the teacher who is there to answer their questions, to encourage them, to tell them, yes, you're getting it. Hey, come on, Amy,
30
you've
seconds.
got the idea. Please, please rethink this. If you continue with this, and students not being in school, running wild, you might as well tell the unicameral to start building the prisons, because we're going to have a crime wave because of children who have been robbed of an education. And it's not fair, and I know that's not what you want. And I want to thank you so much for listening. You all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Ms. Gard.
And now I will let someone else come in and take my seat, because I've had opportunity to share. Thank you very much. Any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, folks. Our next speaker is Jennifer Dartman.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Dartman. That is Jennifer. Last name is D as in Delta, A-R, T as in Tango, M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, N as in Nancy. I am coming here tonight as a parent. I have 2 children who attend OPS. I am also a graduate of OPS. And my child today, this morning, we were talking about her going back to school, and she completely broke my heart. She told me she was scared to go back to school because she did not want to catch COVID and bring it home to me or my family. My mother currently has stage 4 ovarian cancer. Because I am a working mom and my husband works, we are unable to transport to school because we also live within 3 blocks. So they go to my mother's house and my mother transports them to school 4 days a week. My mother will be unable to do that this year because of COVID. So we are stuck in a hard place because they will have days where they won't be able to attend school and one of us will have to call in sick and stay home with them and take them to school, or we're just not completely sure. And that scares me because I do think they need to have an education. So I think that we should stick with remote learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dartman. Folks, we are going, can you hear me? We're going to take a 5-minute recess and then reconvene after that. Colleagues, if you look at your cell phone, I'll text you. Thank you. Folks, there is no security threat to you in this room. Anyone here? We had a visitor that we have asked to leave the premises, and security is escorting them off the premises. Thank you. All right, folks. If everybody could start making their way to their seats, we can begin as soon as everyone's back. One of the things that we do that we do not stand for in Omaha Public Schools is racism. And no matter where it's at, we as a district that has 54,000 students and 9,000 employees stand up for everyone, and we will not tolerate any bigotry or hatred on our premises, in our schools, in our classrooms, in our programs. It's now 7:07. Mr. Ray, are you ready? Our next speaker is Renee Thompson.
Good evening.
Mrs. Thompson, can you
Yes.
cover your mask?
I can't talk with it on. You won't be able to hear me.
We can hear you through the thing if you speak loud enough.
No, I'm not going to wear a mask.
All right, thank you.
I am opposed to the reopening of the Omaha Public Schools using the mitigations being
you have a
imposed
medical
by
reason
the
not to wear your
UOPS
mask,
school
Mrs.
district.
Thompson?
Our society has been locked down far too long, with our personal liberties continuing to be limited daily, and with only a small percentage of coronavirus deaths being reported. I think I read last night.
Mrs. Thompson, can you wear your mask, please?
147 deaths in the United
Mrs.
States
Thompson,
last week.
can you please just wear the mask?
No, I'm not.
Then your public comment's
No.
over.
Everybody should act responsibly to protect their own health and the health.
No, we aren't shutting her off. That isn't nice. I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like that. She isn't obscene. She's talking up there. She's not going to do anything. I don't like that.
Our next speaker is Simaret Habti. I apologize for that. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Goodbye. Security,
That's not nice.
you're next. Goodbye. Goodbye.
I don't like this.
Thank you, Mrs. Thompson.
That's very disturbing to me.
Mrs. Thompson has to leave the room.
Which one is she?
The lady in the back with the mask off. This is an education facility. You have to leave the premises. Thank you, Mr. Storr. Goodbye. Next speaker? Sorry about that.
Hello, my name is Samrat Hapte. I live at 11566 Rainbow Ridge Road, and I'm a 2020 graduate of Omaha Central High School. And I just want to say, first of all, that the most important lesson I learned as an OPS student was how to speak up for myself and for what I believe in. It's not a failure of the district, it's its biggest success. I'm here today as a part of what youth can do. This past Saturday, we held a rally for OPS students to express their support for change within our district to create an equitable educational system for every student in OPS. Our demands are as follows. Number one, canceling OPS contracts with surrounding police departments and eliminating armed resource officers from our schools. Number two, prioritizing prevention over reaction when it comes to school safety. Number three, providing exceptional and widely accessible mental health resources for all students. Number four, emphasizing Black history, including the history of the Black community of Omaha in our curriculum. And number five, diversifying honors, AP, and IB classes to accurately reflect the diversity of the entire student body. In the past few weeks, we've been looking for information from the district so that we can have an adequate understanding of what OPS has already done and is doing to address the disparities we brought up today. Unfortunately, we're having a difficult time locating all the documents that we've been searching for, specifically the NTSSB disproportionality analyses from each OPS elementary, middle, and high school. We've asked for these documents in particular several times and haven't received them. We've also searched the official website and board documents, and we are still unable to locate them. On May 31st, What Youth Can Do had a virtual meeting with the Director of Diversity and Equity, Dr. Logan, and other OPS teachers and counselors, where we verbally asked for the reports. The next day, we sent a written request for the disproportionality analyses, as well as other documents. We received the other information, as well as additional information, which was helpful to our efforts, but not what we requested. Then again, on July 2nd, we sent another written request explicitly asking for just the disproportionality analyses to both Dr. Logan and the NTSSB supervisor, and have yet to receive a response to the latest request. Today, we're here to ask for transparency from the district. Systemic racism isn't a problem we can ignore in the hopes that it will disappear on its own. We need to acknowledge that it exists within our schools and find a solution so that OPS can live up to its vision. Every student, every day, prepared for success. And lastly, I wanted to speak to my experience as a student of OPS. I went to middle school at a predominantly white parochial school out west where I was one out of 3 Black girls in my grade. When it came time to choose a high school, I was prioritizing the diversity of the school, which is why I ended up at Central. I saw more Black students walking to my first hour honors biology class the very first day of high school than I did in all my years at middle school. However, when I stepped in my classroom, I was dismayed to see that it wasn't much different than middle school. I was once again one of the very few Black girls. That image sent a very clear message: you're not welcome here. A school and district well known across the state for its diversity can't, in good conscience, allow this disparity to continue. Your students need to see a district-wide commitment to acknowledging this problem and finding a solution that begins at early education and continues through all their years at OPS. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lauren Anderson. And I will remind everybody that's here, please make sure your face mask covers your mouth and your nose while you're in the boardroom. The people at the back wall. Yes. Okay. Please speak.
Hello, my name is Lauren Anderson, and I live at 751 North 57th Avenue. I'm a proud 2020 graduate of Central High School. I'm here to address What Youth Can Do's 5th demand, which concerns diversifying upper-level classes. This would not mean lowering standards for Black and Indigenous students, which is a racist assumption in itself, or forcing students to enroll in classes they are not prepared for nor interested in. We recognize that decreasing the gap in representation between minority and white students in advanced classes is a complex issue, but acknowledging that there is a problem in the first place is a vital first step. Data we received from OPS states that, as of 1819, non-white students and economically disadvantaged students continue to be significantly underrepresented in Central's IB program. The gap between Central's minority student percentage and the IB program's minority student percentage has fluctuated over the past 3 years. Upon examining the tables, we find that in the 2016-17 school year, 60% of the total population at Central was non-white versus 35% being represented in the IB program. 2017-18 found 62.4% versus 35.4%. 2018-19 is 63.3% versus 37%. These numbers have remained virtually the same. AP data by non-white representation finds that, again at Central, 35.1% of the non-white population is enrolled in AP courses, 40% to the 67.8% at North, 33% to the 50.8% at Burke, 58% to 73.3% at Northwest. and so on. Here are some testimonials that were provided by students. One of the more underrated struggles of being isolated as a student of color in these classes is having to constantly code switch. This became especially relevant for me while taking advanced courses throughout middle school. I'd have to constantly abandon very vital parts of my character just to feel like I had somewhat belonged. Doing this caused me to dim the bright light within myself for many years. I do not believe I did it because of my fear of being inadequate amongst my classmates. I believe I did it because of my fear that maybe I was truly brilliant and my classmates would not know how to handle the young black boy who doesn't speak, dress, or look like them being the smartest in the room. It is exhausting hiding the best and most important parts about yourself simply because there is no one who looks like or understands you in the classroom. It is exhausting having to separate home and school, fearing that your mixing of the two will affect the way you're perceived. It is and will continue to be exhausting to be a black student in honors and advanced placement classes if we do not acknowledge and proactively address the huge gap in representation between minority students and white students. That testimony came from a 2020 South High grad. Being in AP classes as an African American felt isolating and lonely. There wasn't anyone that I could really connect with in any of my classes. Even though I'm very social and can make friends easily, it still felt like I was alone the majority of the time. I also felt like I didn't have anyone to back me up in certain situations that happened in class, especially when we read novels about social justice issues such as racism. I would always get stared at by my peers since I was the only black girl. Diversifying AP, IB, and honors classes would help many black girls and boys in class that felt the way I did and know that they are not alone. That testimony came from a Central 2020 grad. And finally, from a white Central 2021 grad. Educational institutions are supposed to be places where we learn about how to exist and behave in the real world before being sent out into it. Looking around in my AP and honors classes, I do not see the diversity that are present in the Omaha and OPS communities. In AP English especially, we are told to have thought-provoking, critical conversations about societal topics like racism that are prevalent in the written material we are reading, but it is not appropriate nor fruitful to have those conversations without members of those affected communities present at the table. We need diversity in those classrooms and in those discussions so we can better learn how to have these civil and educational discussions outside the classroom. As mentioned before, there is no simple solution to this issue. What youth can do is suggesting that positive reinforcement for black and brown students needs to begin in elementary schools and continue on throughout the rest of their life in the education system. White peers and instructors must make it a habit to listen to and amplify the voices of their black and indigenous classmates and students. Implicit bias training must be mandated for all OPS staff. We're hoping to work with the district to find more solutions to this complex issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Vanessa Amoth.
Hello, my name is Vanessa Amwa, and I live on 14882 Jane Street, 68116, Omaha, Nebraska. And I first want to say thank you for reinforcing the mask rule so people who are autoimmune compromised can speak today. Armed resource officers have to be removed from all OPS schools. When SROs were introduced into the school setting, they were put into place in the hopes of protecting students in case of tragedy such as a mass shooting. What we've learned over the years since they were implemented was that SROs often don't carry out their intended purpose and have an adverse impact on students of color. We want to emphasize that by cutting ties with the police departments, we don't mean that there will be no security at schools, or that if needed, the police department wouldn't respond to emergencies at our schools. However, the presence of police officers in school often has the opposite impact on many students than what is intended. For many students, there are traumatic experiences associated with law enforcement, especially now after the violence that many OPS students were victims of at the hands of police during the protest in late May. Sorry, my mask makes it a little hard to breathe. All right. Our school needs to be a place where all students can feel safe around all authority figures, so that when they have a positive and productive learning environment. Not only that, but school resource officers often contribute to the school-to-prison pipeline that disproportionately targets black and brown students. Many problems seen in the school environment that have a complex and deep-rooted causes are turned into simple criminal issues when there are police present. Black and brown students are too often the victims of that over-criminalization that continues to add to the problem of mass incarceration in this country. Mass incarceration is the modern-day slavery. Once you're inside the system, you're no longer considered a human being. Most felons' right to vote is stripped away, and they cannot apply for state or federal grants, public housing, or food stamps. The biggest challenge for these men and women is often finding a job. If the government continues to take away these rights, then how are people supposed to change for the better? Many times they cannot, and then they land right back into the system that they were designed to take away their humanity. Although SROs are put in place to respond in times of crisis, such as during an active shooter situation, we've learned over the years that in most of all cases, it isn't an SRO that ends the crisis, but a perpetrator themselves or another unarmed person who restrains the shooter. After these tragedies occur, we always hear in the news about the perpetrator's history of mental health illness. Instead of hoping for an effective reaction in the moment of crisis, we want the school district to fund an exceptional mental health and community resources for the students to prevent these tragedies from occurring in the first place. Government funding for its prisons has increased 3 times more than their funding for public education in the last 30 years. Instead of pouring money into the prison system and the police, the government must invest that money in our schools and our communities, and this change starts locally. OPS would not be the first district to remove SROs in light of recent events. Minneapolis Public Schools, Denver Public Schools, and Portland Public Schools have already taken this monumental and vital step. We may not be the first, but we cannot be the last and allow our students to be targeted by a racist system that is counting on their downfall. Imagine if we invested these tens of thousands of dollars into hiring more black and brown counselors. We also conducted a survey about the impact of SROs, and we will be sending you the results. We know safety and support are not binary. We're simply looking for an emphasis on support right now.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ruby Martinez.
Hi, my name is Ruby Martinez, and my address is 9716 Nina Street, and I also am a graduating senior at Central High. And today I'm here to discuss one of the demands with what youth can do that seems to be hard for people to wrap their head around. I stopped myself before calling it difficult to achieve, because calling it difficult would take away from the urgency of the problem and how sometimes tedious things need to be done for change to be made. Diversifying AP and honors classes is not something that can be done with the snap of a finger. This will take disassembling the very fabric woven by systemic racism. One thing important to remember about this demand is that it will take many little changes before the larger one can be noticed. One of the first things that I think should be taken care of is searching for more empathetic educators. Too often are black youth targeted for similar behavior to white. Too often do teachers argue and antagonize students acting out in class instead of trying to understand the real source of the problem, which could be a struggle at home, bullying, or some kind of identity crisis. We also need to address and stare directly at the shortcomings of our educational system. Why is it that the expulsion and suspension rate of black and brown youth is greater than their white counterparts? Keep in mind, for doing the same exact things. This cannot be dismissed by believing that specific races have inherent qualities of deviance. That is a racist ideology. These problems need to be forcefully attacked by educating, creating empathy, and never letting racial disparities be pushed to the side. School may be a building where kids sit, listen, and write, but it is also where we spend a major part of our young adulthood. Our personalities and our social self-esteem are shaped here, and you must remember that. In every OPS high school, there is one social worker and one community counselor, and that is for every student in the school. I believe except for South High, I believe there's one psychologist at South High. If students were to have better access to psychological help from people who look like them, they could develop better coping mechanisms for their own individual struggles and work on their confidence that had been stripped from them through microaggressions and years of mistreatment. We also must teach students that what smart is defined as is not one thing, and it's subjective. I never want to hear a black or a brown student ever say that they feel dumb or stupid for not being in an AP or honors class, as if their battle with oppression has not brought onto them a deeper intellect that white and white-passing people will never be able to fully understand. And it is your job to try. If any of you feel personally attacked, offended, or discomforted by any of the statements being made by me or anyone else here, remember, this is not about you or your biases. This is about the youth that you have the power to impact. Do not be disheartened by anything that is said. Instead, be inspired by these voices to make a change. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jamie Rife. You put on your form, sounds like knife, I think.
Sounds like
Makes sense.
It's okay. Okay. First of all, I'd like to say sorry for my tire. I came from the dentist, so. But
Try to put the mic a little bit closer to you, or or bend down so that we can hear you.
My name is Jamie Rife. My address is 5258 Clay Street, 68152. And I've been a student in OPS since 2011. In middle school, I witnessed a lot of unfair treatment towards students of color. I went to Nathan Hale, which is a predominantly black school. Many times my fellow classmates were prosecuted or treated differently for things that I did the same thing. Sort of? Yeah, okay. So when I would have my phone out and a person of color would have their phone out, they were more likely to get sent out of class or get in trouble. And many times the administration at Nathan Hale, seemed to criminalize the black and brown students in the school. And from my experience, those students lost class time because they were suspended, as over time the administration would grow a bias against the student. For the first time they got in trouble or continuously, they would kick them out of school. So I came up today to say that I think administrators need more bias training and diversity training when choosing to be an administrator in middle school and high schools and elementary schools, as biases, sometimes people don't know they have them, with the right training can be taken out, and students will get more class time, more time in the schools, and more time with their peers to understand real issues and learn the actual things in class that they need to. So this wasn't my speech, but I was nervous, so thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Shanece Oliver.
Hi, my name is Shanece Oliver, SHA''LISE, Oliver, OLIVER, and my address is 5132 North 116th Street. So I would like to first start by saying what we're requesting of you, what we with What Youth Can Do is requesting of you, is transparency. Yes, it would be great if all our demands could be met, but at the very least, we would like a conversation. No disrespect, but the opening statement felt like a very polite way of saying, yes, we heard your concern about SROs, but no, we're not going to do anything about it. So if that is the choice that you all have had a conversation with about and that you've all decided on, we would like to be a part of that conversation. We would like a reason why. We know that if you were not able to attend our rally on Saturday, we would very much appreciate if you would go back and watch those videos and actually listen to what we're saying. Don't just be like, oh, that's great, but listen to the words coming out of our mouth and our reasoning for why we want to see these changes within our district. So what I came up here to speak about was incorporating more Black history and more of Omaha's Black history into our class. So a lot of what you guys have heard today is about systemic racism, and one way that we could help untangle that system is through our education system and starting young. We have to depict African Americans and Black people as more than just slaves. I know my history because I've chosen to do research on my own. I know my history because we have conversations about that in my household. But for those who don't, and for those who only have those conversations at school, all they know Black people as is slaves and civil rights leaders. That's about it. So we need to have more of a conversation around that, and more of us needs to be incorporated in our history, and especially more of Omaha's history. Most people come to North Omaha and think of it as the dirty ghetto. Little do they know that there's so much rightness and greatness here in North Omaha, directly where the TAC building is located. And we go out to the Mormons and we learn about all those other places of Omaha, but why don't we learn about here? So a greater conversation needs to be had, and when we can talk about incorporating things into the school system, something that I always hear a lot about is, okay, well, what about the curriculum?
There's plenty of other outside sources such as UNO who has this curriculum already made. We teach courses from UNO. We teach courses from UNO in our AP courses. So why don't we have an African American Studies course? Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Anika Ellefson, and I probably slaughtered your name again. I apologize.
My name is Annika Ellefson. I don't blame you for the mispronunciation. I have horrible handwriting.
No, you're perfectly fine.
That's spelled ANNIKAELLEFSON. I live at 3507 Jones Street, apartment 207, Omaha, Nebraska 68105. I originally was here to repeat a edited version of a letter that I sent to all of you. But hearing the young people speak, I want to first echo their statements. Police have no place in a school, ever, ever, ever. And I'm frankly appalled that I was not aware of the work you were already doing. But I will read what I have to say. I'm a paralegal. I work out of downtown Omaha, and I'm here to say that reopening physical schools would be an act of violence. Children, especially children from families in poverty, will die preventable deaths if schools are reopened as planned. As case numbers continue to grow and our legislation denies safety to its citizens by forcing the state to reopen, I beg you to at least keep this exposure limited. I know that the reopening plan will limit exposure somewhat, but there will still be spread. I'm going to toss some numbers out there, and they won't be exceptionally accurate, but I hope they illustrate my point. Let's say only 5% of kids catch COVID-19. I think that's generous, given the kids that I know and how good they are at hand washing and not picking their noses. No offense meant to the kids. According to the Census Bureau, about 24.9% of Omaha's population is under the age of 18, and 7.3% of those are under 5. The estimated population is 478,192. So there are about 84,162 school-age children in just the Omaha area. 5% of those kids would be 4,208. That's 4,000 kids put in life-threatening, preventable danger, not to mention all of the parents, grandparents, and siblings too young to go to school. Even though many of those children would survive, you'd be leaving even more of them with permanent damage to their hearts and lungs at a critical time in their development. On a personal note, I have 4 younger siblings. 3 of them are still in school. I'm sure that I don't have to say that I love them dearly and don't want them to die. Their deaths become far more likely with schools open. In addition to my siblings, my father and my partner are both teachers. My father doesn't work for OPS, but my partner does. I hope you protect my partner and set a good example for the school district my father works in. It's a strange world where a person has to beg the Board of Education and their fellow citizens not to kill their family. But here I am, and I am begging. Please, please don't put children and teachers and other school staff of our city in any more danger than they already are. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Candace Price.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Candace Price. It's spelled CANDICEPRICE. My address is 5132 North 116th Street in Omaha. So I'm here tonight as a parent. First, I'm very proud of the hard work that these students have put in getting their voices heard and getting their mission across. When we talk about a mission, I will say, though I appreciate each of you who are here, especially those, volunteering to be here and work hard and spend extra hours, the mission of OPS has definitely failed. When I hear the mission to prepare all students to excel in college, career, and life, I don't know that we're preparing, a third of the students for that properly. When it comes to talking about minority students in any of the advanced courses, any of the gifted and talented programs, it's not there. I was in gifted and talented growing up, and my daughter has faced the exact same thing that I did, and I was in school in the 80s and 90s. And in 2020, it hasn't changed. She's one of very few black faces that you would find in the AP and honors courses at her school, and she went to North, which is one of the more diverse schools in our state. Prior to her going to North, however, we lived out west, and she attended the majority white schools. She did that for a reason. One, when I moved here, I was told I worked for a Fortune 500 company that's downtown. I was specifically told by individuals there not to go to 30th Street when I moved here to the city. I'm not sure if they're still telling new hires that or not. I'm no longer with them. That's absurd. I should not have to have my daughter away from those that look like her, feel the things that she feels, in order to feel that her education will be equal or high. When she's in these gifted classes and these honors courses, she shouldn't be alone. When I explain North to individuals, I shouldn't have to define why I would allow my child to go there and she selected her school. However I do. With her coming out of Saddlebrook and coming out of Davis at the time, I have to explain and validate why I would allow my child to attend North High School, and that doesn't make any sense. But what's sadder is that I also have to explain that it's two different schools in that building. Her friends that she was on the dance team with, her friends that she does other activities with, are getting a very different education than she's receiving there. Many of her friends are not in the AP honors or engineering track, the STEM track, and their education is different. They are coming out of this school as 2020 grads as if they went to belong to two different school systems, as a matter of fact. It's very lacking. There's the regular school, then there's the science, robotics, engineering track that's literally in a different part of the school. So they really only mix and mingle after school or during lunch. That definitely has to be looked at every program here within the OPS school system, and it can be fixed. Right now, she's getting ready to attend school at North Carolina A&T State University. She turned down a full ride scholarship to UNL to attend there so that she could be with other students like her. NCAT happens to produce the most black engineers in our country of any of the schools, including the PWIs. And so because she's going for civil engineering, she wants to be around other high-attaining students that also look like her, so it is actually possible. She's actually taking college courses right now. Her engineering class, she has a black professor. It was absolutely unheard of. It was astounding to me. That made me so proud that she can have a black professor. Her very first black teacher wasn't until middle school. Her very first black administrator wasn't until high school. That's because she's in the OPS school system. So now she's heading out, but I have a 4-year-old. She needs to see something different. She will be entering the OPS school system at some point. Her experience should be far different. If she's in one building, her education should be the same as every other student in that building, and it should be high. The only other thing that I'll speak to tonight, of course, is school opening. There is no way that there's going to be a perfect solution. I feel really badly for each of you in the shoes that you have to fill in making this decision of deciding education over safety, in having to decide whether children are at home or get a break from home if they have issues at home so that they can come to school.
30 seconds.
I do not envy you, but I appreciate each of you for taking your best shot at doing what will work for our community and making certain our kids are educated and listening to everyone's point of view that's here. Though we each have very differing points of view, I just thank you for taking the time to do that and for allowing me to speak as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Queen Alabi. And can we have someone move the mic down, please? Thank you.
Hello. My name is Queen Alabi, Kwenealabi. My address is 11151 Handover Street. I am a Central High graduate and a part of What Youth Can Do. I completed my primary and secondary education in OPS. As an OPS alum, I was extremely disappointed by the non-existent response from the district in regards to Black Lives Matter. As Nebraska's most diverse school district, it is necessary that the importance of students of color is acknowledged. To recognize that Black students matter is the bare minimum. OPS is not immune. to the recent events and conversations that have been occurring across the nation. There's no pretending that racism doesn't reside in our own schools and is not a part of the foundation of our district's history. A middle school named after Omaha's first black aviator and a high school named after a segregationalist superintendent cannot coexist for obvious reasons. And this alone highlights the discrepancies in OPS's values of equality and accountability. I joined What Youth Can Do because for 13 years, I watched the school district turn a blind eye to incidences of blatant racism, not only from students, but from staff. As a black disabled girl, I often felt invisible and that somehow my presence was a disservice to the district. When I spoke up about how I felt, I was shut down by staff and district officials. Looking back, I wonder how this is possible if in this school district, every student matters. For the sake of the district's future, there needs to be change. No longer can we be silent on human rights issues. Going further, I ask that OPS begins to actually value every student. And in the face of injustices, racism, sexism, queerphobia, and ableism stands against them. I ask that there be more transparency and dialogue that turns into action. Now more than ever, your students are watching and need you. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Gina Miller. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Gina Miller. I reside in Mrs. Godding's district, and I have children in the district. Good evening, Superintendent Logan, Board President Mr. Snow, and the OPS board members. I have a lot to cover, but I do want to take a moment and thank everybody that came to speak tonight, especially our youth. Those have been items that, especially the disproportionate contributions to the AP programs in our district that I have been talking about for years. And I'm glad that the students have finally found their voices and are speaking directly to everyone so that we can start taking this seriously. I don't know what it's going to take this seriously, but it has to be done. We have a packed agenda tonight, and there are a lot of things on there that I'd like to talk a little bit about. On the revised attendance policy that I thought was up for second reading, but it might be on the consent agenda. I'm a little confused after I saw what was on tonight. The new part to the attendance policy is adding restorative justice practices to the 5-day interventions. And anyone who has worked in or around juvenile justice knows that the definition of restorative justice practices means usually within the system, and the money and programs are within the system designed for the rehab of offenders through reconciliation with victims and the community at large. The entire purpose of the rewrite of the law was to keep our children out of the system, and so I am very concerned with how that is written. I would ask for everybody to vote no on that until we get a clear definition of what the district means by restorative justice practices. I think that it could be some good intentions that could go horribly wrong very quickly. The second thing is the code of conduct. I appreciate the work that's being done on the code of conduct and all the changes that have been made. I would like to specifically thank Mr. Perlman for his persistence that drug dealing of illegal drugs on campus and sexual assault is referred to police, where that was going to be a may instead of a must. And I hope that those changes will be recognized this evening. Drug dealing and sexual assault on school grounds are issues that should be referred, not necessarily attendance issues. Reopening school. I am reissuing my desire for a full reopening of school and having to continue the conversation. As of today, I looked right before I came out here tonight, and on the Douglas County Health Department, the rate of testing is going up while the positive tests are trending down. I do have a couple sheets, but I don't know if you're handing out handouts tonight because of the COVID regulations. I would like to remind the public of last year's AQuest scores, which rank all schools in the state of Nebraska. OPS received as a district a needs improvement. Our ranking of proficiency in English was 33% proficiency, where the state average was 52%. Math was 30% proficiency, where the state average was 52%. Science was 43%, and the state average is 66%. We have already seen pop-up paid programs to supplement on the OPS off days, which in my opinion will only continue to widen the gap that exists between those with means and those without. Those of us that can pay for programming outside of the school on our days off for our children will do it, and we'll continue to outpace those that cannot, and our poverty issues will continue to expand. I'm confused on why we are limiting the remote learning options. If individuals have concerns or needs that should be available, remote learning, distant learning should be available to all who want or need that, and then open our schools full-time for those who want and need full-time in-person educating. Our children are already in daycare, in child programs, in sports, at work. It'll make a lot more sense to keep them all together with their classmates instead of taking them out and exposing them to more people and bringing them back in on a weekly basis. I thank you all, as always, for all of your help, all of your assistance, and all that you do on a day-to-day basis. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller. Our next speaker is Regan Simmons. And the students that are here with the group What Youth Can Do, please email me. I've been fighting this stuff since 2013, and many of us have. That's the reason why we have our great superintendent, Dr. Cheryl Logan, here. And I advise you to go look at that hallway there and look at the change that we've made. It's not perfect, but it's a start. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. All right. So, my name is Regan Simmons. Hopefully you can understand me behind this mask. I don't usually wear one, but I'm playing along with all this. There are 570,000 people in Douglas County, and 105 have died with COVID in the last 3 months, so 0.016 of the population. Statewide, there are currently 98 COVID hospitalizations. According to Johns Hopkins, less than 2% of COVID cases are in the United States are children under 18. Several studies have now shown asymptomatic transmission is rare or non-existent. Why are you forcing masks that don't work for a pandemic that literally does not exist in our community? Public health is a local issue according to the law, common sense, and the President of the United States, so we must look at local numbers. Give parents the option to opt out. The World Health Organization says long-term mask use has high risk. Whenever there's a risk, there should be a choice. Children who have had past trauma, behavior issues, breathing issues, sensory issues, ADD, ADHD, and many other private health matters deserve an education. Not a Zoom education, not a part-time education, a real education. The right to an education is a fundamental human right required by law. Every individual, irrespective of race, gender, nationality, ethnic or social origin, religion or political preference, age or disability, is entitled to a free elementary education. This right has been universally recognized since the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 and has since been enshrined in various international conventions, national constitutions, and development plans. A child who once perceived school as safe and comfortable will now be conditioned to fear other children and places throughout the school for fear of being sick. Why is the district with one of the highest rates of minorities in our area, 74%, and one of the highest rates of poverty in our area, only going to offer a 50% education and put single parents out of work with its 3-2 plan? Other local districts with higher incomes and predominantly white will enjoy a 5-day school week. In OPS, of the 40,000 students who participate in the FRPL program, 88.7% of those kids qualify for free lunch rather than reduced lunch, which indicates a more intense level of socioeconomic need. These are the kids you plan to steal an education from, an income from? For what? A virus that literally has a 99% recovery rate. This 3-2 plan is detrimental to our children, our families, and our community, and it's not acceptable. I took the time to print off some things for the board. I can hand those out when I'm done. But basically, it shows a picture of a petri dish. This is what happens when you cough. You expel things. With masks all that stuff is going to stay right on your face. This should never go on a child's face. There are potential harms and disadvantages to wearing masks that we need to consider. You don't know my health status. I don't know your health status. You certainly don't know the health status of the thousands of kids in OPS and what their needs are. I encourage you to look at this list of potential harms and disadvantages, such as increased self-contamination, potential headache, breathing difficulties, a false sense of security, poor compliance and mask wearing, in particular with young children. This is from the World Health Organization. It was published in June of 2020. It also has a chart on here talking about the filtration efficiency. We all know this mask is not doing anything for me right now. It's not filtering anything out, but in order for me to be able to speak today, in order for me to be able to enter the building, I was told I had to wear the mask. And I am here fighting for our kids, fighting for the most vulnerable in our community to get an education. I mean, people want to know what they can do about systemic racism. I had a coworker ask me, like, what can I do? Well, for number one, you can fight for their education. These kids deserve a 5-day school week. I don't know why this is even a question. It's ridiculous. And as far as what happened earlier with the lady being kicked out with her 2 girls, that is a violation of the Open Meetings Act. And the Attorney General will be contacted tomorrow
30
because
seconds.
she had every right to be here. It is a public meeting. I'm sorry you didn't like what her sign said or whatever, but we will be contacting the Attorney General tomorrow, Toot Sweet. What can I
Thank
get
you.
these
You
two?
can leave them right there on the podium on the floor. Just somebody will get them. Thank you.
Our next speaker
Thank
is Kesa Ufflers. And again, I apologize with the names today.
No one ever gets it right, so no offense. It's Cassia Ulfers. It's Kassia. Last name is Ulfers, Ullffers. And I live on 6603 North 151st Street. And first of all, I just want to thank all of you guys for your hard work. I know you guys put in a ton of hours to try to make good choices for our children, and I do appreciate that. And I know you get a lot of complaints and a lot of things, but I did not come up with a speech to say today, but I just wanted to come up. I'm a healthcare worker. I actually care for COVID patients. And unfortunately, media does skew everything, and there's just, that fear. And I just want to stand up for my children. And as a medical professional, we stand up in surgery, in radiation, and we say, stop, time out, I have a concern, or this isn't right. We don't just proceed with the procedure and not look at it. There's just so many red flags and stops with this family 3-2 model that I just kind of put it into perspective of taking care of my patients, that we want to do what's right. And I know you guys want to do what's right. It's not an us against them. It's a let's work together and figure out what's best for all of our children. And I just want to come to all of you and ask you guys to reconsider this family 3-2 model. I don't know either who decided it or know it was a board, but I would ask that the board would question that they can come and say, can we vote on this, as it was not something that was even voted on. But look at what's coming out, and we are taking away from our kids' education. I respect that we want to keep our kids safe and healthy. I care for COVID patients, and yet I still go home and care for my children. With masks, if you're not perfectly fitted, it's really masks kind of are worthless. But I'm going to comply, and I'm trying to encourage my kids, no matter what happens with OPS, we're going to make the best of it. But now is the time to stand up and take a voice and say, wait, stop, I have a concern, time out, let's look at this. So I just want to encourage all of you to let's look back and see, are we really making a responsible choice? Are we deciding out of fear? Or are we deciding really out of statistics and what's best for the child, the emotional, physical, and well-being of the child? We can keep them safe, but if they don't have an education or anything to go with that, what benefit is that? Even when the spread is so low, I think we just really need to not let fear take away from our children. So I'm just asking the board that if you guys can say, hey, we want to vote on this, we want to look at this. Time out. It's not too late. It's not too late. We don't want to amputate the wrong leg. I mean, those are grave effects, and we can have grave effects on our children. So I'm just asking that you all as a board member stand up and say, we would like to vote on this. We would like to have a say. And if we change our minds, that's okay. Policies and procedures change all the time. COVID changes all the time. Every day I go to work, there's a new policy and procedure. So I just want to encourage all of you to, if we need to stop and resolve, let's do that. And I do thank you for all of your time that you've put in.
Thank you. The next speaker is Bret Alexandra.
Hi, I'm Britt. As you can tell, I'm out of breath. I have an irregular heartbeat, so thank you for making me wear this. Hello. Thanks for having us here and giving us a chance to speak. I'm a mama of two strong and healthy boys. I am here on behalf of my friends' children and my siblings that attend South, Mars, and Gomez. I have an issue when the government and schools start telling us what to do and how we can treat our body. That's a problem. Out of curiosity, I have some questions I just want to ask. Masks. Since you're requiring them for the children and staff, what kind of masks? Are we talking N95 masks, your Pinterest cloth masks, these flimsy blue masks, or bandanas like yours, sir? Or a sweatshirt wrapped around your face? Because yes, that let my mom into the Sprint store. To me, that's not about a health issue. Since y'all breathe through them differently, it's more of a compliance. Will there be checking of the children's oxygen levels throughout the day if they have to wear one? Once these kids start dropping like flies because they're wearing these masks throughout the day, who's to blame? You can't blame the sickness on, oh, kids are in school, germs, it happens. You can't do that anymore. Why? Because you're wearing masks. They're to protect you, right? So once these kids start getting lung infections and respiratory issues during the school years, are you going to call it COVID and shut down? Because once again, we can't blame them for being at school getting sick anymore because they're wearing masks. They're protected. So once again, throughout the day, who's going to be checking these children's oxygen levels? Who is responsible for when a child passes out in gym class? What are you going to tell the child who suffers from trauma from being abused at home when their mom or dad or somebody covers their mouth from screaming? It's going to bring back memories, flashbacks. What happens when kids don't wear a mask? Are they going to be judged, discriminated? Because we all know we don't like to be discriminated against. No, as a mom, I'm walking through the grocery store with my son who's 3 the other day. I get glares, I get the looks. I smile at the people wearing masks and I get no emotion, just kind of how I see you guys. I just see your eyes. But man, if eyes could kill. My son just asked the other day while in Target. Once again, he's 3. Mama, why is everybody so sad and not talking? If a 3-year-old can feel that, come on. These kids have been cooped up at home for the past 5 to 6 months. They're ready to get back and see their teacher's smiling faces. Not every kid has that at-home lovey-dovey feeling. And then they're coming back to school with this.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Nikki. I'll let you pronounce your last name. I apologize. Good evening.
Hello, how are you guys? So it's Nikki Garamani. So originally I was here just to protest outside. I wasn't planning on speaking today, so excuse me for how I'm dressed and maybe all over the place tonight. Also, I do appreciate, thank you for your time, taking the time to hear all of our statements tonight. I first off want to say I in no way envy the position that you all are in. Either way you go, you are going to make someone upset. But I appreciate the work and the time you are taking to try to make the best decision. I have a 6-year-old who is going into 1st grade. He is here with me tonight. And as I speak before you today, I may have some different concerns than other parents here, but I do know the general consensus amongst a lot of parents within Omaha reflect the same as mine, and that is concern. Concern for our child's health and the decisions being made at the board level of our school districts and health guidelines.
that have come out since COVID has started. We are all part of, I myself and some other parents, about 1,000 parents within the Omaha area, are all a part of a group that we're on Facebook, and we all have very similar concerns. As we all know, there are many types of families within our Omaha area: two-parent homes, blended families, and single-parent homes. I am that single-parent home. My main concern has to do with how your board expects single parents to do both. I am expected as a single mom to not only, if we go to a full at-home learning situation, I'm supposed to provide for my child, and I'm supposed to be a homeschool teacher at that point. So I'm just curious, what do you expect a single mom like myself to do to ensure my son gets the education he deserves? The majority of OPS will be negatively impacted if you do not return back to 100% full-time school 5 days per week. The next item of concern I have is the possible consequence of a student not wearing a mask. If I choose that wearing a mask is not healthy for my son and he comes to school without a mask on, what does that mean for him? Will he get in trouble? Will he be the outcast? As an adult, I personally am experiencing this both in public, here tonight, and on social media. You're seen as, quote, selfish and not thinking of others' health when you choose to not wear a mask. I feel like I'm walking around basically with a scarlet letter on my chest. What impacts will this have on our kids if they do not have a mask on? Will my son be told he cannot participate in a group activity? Will he be excluded unless he complies? Will he be bullied? Another concern, I am all for cleaning and hand washing. This should have already been in place before, but too much isn't good as well. So when it's stated frequent cleaning, what exactly does that mean? Every hour? Is there any transition time between that? I also wanted to point out that I frankly was appalled with the entrance to this very building. The fact that we were told we had to have a mask to even enter this building is an example of tyranny. The only way my voice was going to be heard tonight was if I complied with your rule and requirement, but which is not a law. Please show me the law where it states I have to wear this mask in this public building. I have been here for only about 30 minutes and I can barely breathe and feel lightheaded. I myself have an irregular heartbeat. I can't even imagine what the effects would be on a young child, including my 6-year-old. I would also like to use the remainder of my time to question why certain citizens were kicked out of the building tonight. According to the website of the Nebraska Attorney General, it states, the Nebraska Open Meetings Act guarantees that every meeting of a public body shall be open to the public in order that citizens may exercise their democratic privilege of attending and speaking at meetings of public bodies. I truly am looking for understanding here of how this was even allowed and what she even did to be kicked out, causing her 2 young daughters to cry.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rachel McAvee. All righty. Next speaker is Tiffany Carter. Good evening.
Mr. Snow, can you please make sure people give their name, spell their name, and give
Yes.
their address? I noticed we've been very inconsistent, and it's not fair to each speaker when they're only giving partial information.
Fair enough. Please spell your name and state your address.
All right, my name is Tiffany Carter, Tiffany Carter. I live in Millard, actually. I'm here representing my friends and family today who are part of OPS. I just wanted to share some stats with you. We've had a lot of information about stats and percentages of how many COVID statistics were of children, but I have some things here for you. I don't know if you can see it. 12.1% of cases confirmed for COVID since March has been 0 to 19 age. Of that, 11.2 have already recovered. So majority of them have recovered. 0 deaths in the state of Nebraska, ages 0 to 19. This is something horrific. Obviously, any death is. But it's not affecting our children like it is in other age groups. Most positive cases were never hospitalized. It's a 99% recovery rate. I also have here in my hand a couple of the directed health measures in Nebraska. This one in particular, it talks about daycare and childcare facilities. So I'll read for page 6 that daycare and childcare services notwithstanding any other state statute, regulation, or order, daycare childcare services may not exceed the lesser of the current license limit. So if you look at this, it breaks down to the different ages. Since we're talking about school, I'll focus on the K through 12 age, the school age. This directed health measure that has been in place throughout the summer says that they can have up to 30 kids in a room or space during their classroom time, daycares and childcare facilities. My children have been in the public school foundation the entire summer. No one was required to wear masks. Majority, if not all, of the daycares have never required masks for children. And in fact, there's nothing in this directed health measure that talks about masking our children. Why? Because they recover. It's something that they get over. Again, any death, any sickness is tragic. But when we hear about masking our children when for several months it has not been in place, why? We have months of data that show that they're recovering. I can show you again, majority of them from 12.1, 11.2% has recovered. So why are we requiring masks? Sorry, it's falling down. Why are we requiring masks all of a sudden when we have data showing that children who have been in these school programs all summer, there's never been a spike. There's never been this drastic increase in cases for children. There are studies that show that it's not transmissible from child to adult. 23 plus countries have already opened up their school systems and had no issues. So I just wonder why all of a sudden, now that we're going back to school, yes, there's concern. And I, again, don't envy you guys. It's a hard decision. You hear from all sides. I can only imagine the weight of this responsibility that you have. However, I want to know what science you're following. I want to know what studies you're looking at to show these mandates that our children have to wear a mask. My children, like I said, have been in the public school summer program all summer. And now schools around not just Omaha, but other locations are requiring masks. You know what that's going to do to my children? They're already in a school environment over the summer, and now all of a sudden they're going to have all these rules. They can't play with their friends. They have to social distance. They have to wear things on their face. My children are going into first grade. I can only imagine
1 minute.
the traumatic events for these incoming kindergartners, because I know how it's going to affect my children going in first grade. They know what they experienced last year, and it's going to be completely different. I ask you to please take into consideration the future results. This pandemic, epidemic, whatever you want to call it, will pass, but the psychological effects that you're going to instill in our children will last much longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kaylee Conrad. Kylie Conrad. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Kylie Conrad, Kylleeconrad. I live at 7204 North 36th Avenue Circle, and I'm here today to bring concerns about the current coronavirus. I personally, all of my grandparents are immunocompromised. One of my grandmas is recovering from cancer. She's in remission currently. Two of my grandparents have COPD, and one of my grandparents she's currently on oxygen because She used to be a smoker. Her lungs aren't that good. Here are some questions that I have. If a teacher tests positive for COVID-19, are they required to quarantine for 2 to 3 weeks? Is their sick leave covered, paid? If that teacher has 5 classes a day with 30 students in each, do all 150 of those students need to then stay home and quarantine for 14 days? Do all 150 of those students now have to get tested? Who pays for those tests? Are they happening at school? How are the parents being notified? Does everyone in each of those kids' families need to be tested? Who pays for that? If somebody who lives in the same house as a teacher tests positive, does that teacher now get 14 days off work for quarantine? Is that time covered? Is that time paid? Where's the district going to find substitute teachers who are willing to work in a classroom full of exposed, possibly infected students for substitute pay? Substitute teachers teach multiple schools. What if they are diagnosed with COVID-19? Do the kids in each school now have to quarantine and get tested? Who's going to pay for that? What if a student in your kid's class tests positive? What if your kid tests positive? Does every other student and teacher then have to go around quarantine, or do we have to get notified? Do we have to be notified who is infected, or when? Or because of the HIPAA regulations, are parents and teachers going to just get mysterious, may have been in contact emails all year long? What is the stress going to do for our teachers? How does it affect their health and well-being? How does it affect their ability to teach? How does it affect the quality of education they are able to provide? What is it going to do to our kids? What is it going to do to the long-term effects of being consistently stressed out? How will it affect students and faculty when the first teacher in their schools die from this? The first parent of the kid who was brought home? The first kid? How many more people are going to have to die otherwise would have stayed if we had just stayed home longer? 30% of the teachers in the U.S. are over 50. About 16% of the total deaths in the U.S. are people between the ages of 45 and 65. I'm bringing this concern because I believe that we should do online classes, or we should just stay home until we have a vaccine or we have a reasonable solution for this pandemic. You guys may have systems in place, but kids are still going to get sick, or teachers are still going to go get sick. And lives aren't worth it. Every human life is special. Every human life is precious. Why do we have the right to say, oh, we're just going to go to school, we're going to hope for the best? We're still going to take that risk. I think we should close schools. Personally, I do. With immunocompromised grandparents, I don't want to be able to risk them. I've lost grandparents. I've lost uncles. And heartbreak is not worth missing time in school or staying home and doing online school. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Flores Aisha. Hello. Again.
And
apologies.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Mr. Perlman.
Point of order that I probably should have made a couple of hours ago. I would ask that we suspend policy to not allow individuals under the age of 19 to provide their home address. I think that's inappropriate, and I think I'm going to ask the board now to suspend that policy.
I don't think we have another speaker that's under 19.
Okay.
Are you under 19?
Yeah.
You're 18? You don't have to.
Okay.
Just
Okay, that's cool.
spell your name.
Hello, my name is Aisha Flores Dominguez. That's spelled AIXA FLORES DOMINGUEZ. I am a recent grad from Omaha South, and I will be a freshman at Columbia University next year. I am here on behalf of the organization What Youth Can Do to talk about our fifth demand. I attended OPS all 13 years of my education, and in those 13 years, I came to a harsh realization. OPS serves the biggest minority population in the state, yet doesn't truly serve them when it comes to mental health. In each of the OPS high schools, only one psychologist serves at each school, and only a few, I believe it is 2 high schools, have a social worker. Why is it that mental health is not being prioritized in our district? Why don't we have more funding going into such an important area? A lot of minority students not only deal with mental health issues, but also deal with being low income.
For many of them, including for myself, our schools are the only place we have access to mental health services, yet it is almost impossible to actually get a hold of these services because of how significant the ratio is from mental health professionals to students. Students are then left to go talk with their academic counselors who are not necessarily trained to deal with mental health issues. Students, especially of color, have to talk with their counselors who usually don't also understand their experiences. Way too many students of color, especially Black students, are finding themselves in a bad position because they are never given services for treatment when they need it. More funding must be put into our mental health services for our students. What Youth Can Do demands that we hire more mental health professionals for OPS schools and that our counselors effectively represent the overwhelmingly student minority population in our district. The district's model is every day, every student prepared for success. We cannot be successful if we are not in an environment where we can succeed. We need to reassure that the biggest population of minority students in any Nebraska school district is being considered. Students of color matter. Black students matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Scout Black. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Scout Black. That's spelled SCOUTBLACK. My pronouns are they, them, and I live at 3802 North 53rd Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68104. I'm here as a community member and advocate. I'm here as a new OPS parent. My son is set to start kindergarten in OPS this fall. And I'm here as an educator and mentor to young people in Omaha. I've had the incredible opportunity over the past 3 years to lead 17 youth and young adults in a youth participatory action research team. I'm going to take off my glasses because they're fogging anyway, so I won't be able to see you. Nearly all of our youth staff have been OPS students or graduates, and the majority of them are young people of color. I'm here today to stand in solidarity with the What Youth Can Do group. Our team tagline at my work is data collected by youth from youth for the improved outcomes of youth. I provide guidance and support as our youth researchers design and carry out their own research projects. The work that our youth and young adult researchers have done has created meaningful change in our community, and the young people I have the opportunity to work with every day are a testament to the foundational importance of listening to young people on the matters that impact them the most. You have students and graduates who are articulate, who are informed, and whose voices and recommendations should determine the way Omaha Public Schools operates moving forward. I'm here to support, elevate, and champion the demands that your students, your graduates, and our youth leaders are making of you. They are as follows. Omaha Public Schools cancel its contract with the Omaha Police Department and eliminate armed officers in Omaha Public Schools. The administration focuses on prevention rather than reaction when it comes to school safety, including prioritizing exceptional, accessible mental health services. The district emphasizes Black, Indigenous, people of color history in the curriculum, including the Black history of Omaha, and that the district diversifies its upper level classes. Thank you for your time this evening. I hope that each of you will uphold your position on the school board and take action to ensure that every student counts and that Black students matter in OPS. Thank you.
Thank you. That was our last public comment. We'll move on to the consent agenda, H1. I would entertain. Yes.
Could we please pull off H48 and maybe ask Mr. Ray to address the concerns that Mrs. Miller had on, that she brought up during her comments? I know Mrs. Miller and I have spent a lot of time in the last 7 years working on attendance policy things, and I want to make sure we get those addressed.
Is that regarding H48 or is that separate?
Am I right on that, Mr. H48?
It's H48 for the policy.
For the policy, second reading?
Yep. For
Okay.
5008.
Okay. All right, we'll pull item H48. So I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda excluding H48.
So moved.
There's a motion by Mr. Smith. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Ryan. Any abstentions? Roll call, please.
Is there?
Yes, Mr. Perlman.
I would like to pull also another item off.
A what item?
Oh, I'm sorry, it already has been. It's the last item on the agenda.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Perlman.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Snipe.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Goding.
Aye.
Hallman.
Aye.
Cracky.
Motion carries. That's 9, I believe. Moving on to our first item. I-1A, Student Code of Conduct, 2020-2021. Dr. McFarland. Good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Okay. Good evening, President Snow, members of the Board of Education, Dr. Logan. It is good to see you all and be here in person. Tonight I am here to provide you additional information and request your action for the 2020-2021 Student Code of Conduct. At our June 15th meeting, I presented to you the 2020-21 draft of the Student Code of Conduct. There were 3 issues that board members asked us to review and provide additional information. The first question I will discuss this evening was about the timeline for printing the Student Code of Conduct for the start of the school year. The second question was to review the recommended change for the Level 4 violation of selling and distribution. And the third question was related to reviewing the sexual assault violation. To begin with the first question, the timeline for printing the Student Code of Conduct. It's an unprecedented year, and our process for producing the Student Code of Conduct has been adjusted several times for a variety of reasons. Throughout this process, we have continued to collaborate with printing and publication regarding our ability to provide the code for the start of the school year. In past years, the code was approved by the board and then printed over the summer in preparation for the beginning of the school year. This year, with adjustments related to COVID-19, we have planned to provide the Student Code of Conduct to all students and our families virtually. We are rapidly approaching the targeted deadline for our final edits, combining it with our school information pages and including it in distribution in the in the district handbook. Once approved, we will work to expedite that preparation for the earlier start to the school year to have it on day 1 for our students, our staff, and our families. The second item carried over from our last meeting was the selling and distribution violation. In the revised draft posted to your meeting agenda tonight, you will note that on page 18, we have now removed the word drugs so that the violation will read, selling, distributing, intent to distribute, or attempting to distribute alcoholic beverages or a controlled, imitation-controlled substance. Additionally, we have removed the previously recommended language change and reverted to an administrative response of contact law enforcement. This same change is reflected on page 28 in the glossary definition. Finally, we had a question around sexual assault violations. Board members asked for clarification from the district as to the rationale for including first and second degree sexual assault in the student code violation
and not third degree. In preparation for tonight's discussion, I reviewed previous year's student code of conducts. The sexual assault violation has been included, identifying both first and second degree in every code since 2015-16, when the board adopted a K-12 student code of conduct. Prior to 2015-16, the district produced 2 documents that were voted on by the board. One being an elementary behavior guideline for students in kindergarten through grade 6, and the second was a secondary student code of conduct for students in grades 7 through 12. In the secondary student code of conduct, the language remained consistent with the language we have today. As far back as I have reviewed, even prior to, as far back as I reviewed, which was to 2009, that language has been consistent. So I cannot speak to you about the intent of the original inclusion. In reviewing our past policy, we also reviewed the Nebraska statutes 28-318 through 28-320.01, which are the statutes pertaining to sexual assault in Nebraska. Statute 28-318 defines the terms that are used in Statute 28-319 and 28-320 that are the 2 statutes specifically referenced in our Student Code of Conduct. 28-319 pertains to sexual assault in the first degree, which identifies penetration of a victim by a perpetrator, or to use the language of statute, an actor. Statute 28-320 pertains to sexual assault in the second and third degree. Second degree involves sexual contact causing serious personal injury to the victim. Third degree indicates sexual contact to an intimate part, defined in statute as the genital area, groin, inner thigh, buttocks or breast, and or the clothing covering those intimate parts. Again, third degree identifies sexual contact on one of these parts and not causing injury to the victim. However, guidance is provided that specifies that it is related not to the victim, but to the intent of the actor. The intention of sexual contact by the actor is for sexual arousal or gratification. Again, it is not about the resulting injury to a victim, it is about the intention of the student who is initiating the action. Furthermore, the annotation provided in the statute specifically states that the issue of intent of sexual gratification in minors must be determined on a case-by-case situation. It must be investigated before the intent can be inferred. Applying to the practice of our schools, anytime a student reports unwelcomed touching, it is investigated and reported to law enforcement. Let me give you several examples why intent and the definition of intimate parts make third-degree sexual assault more difficult to ascertain in a school setting. For example, during a basketball game, a player makes an outstanding shot on goal. A teammate running back down the court slaps the player on the buttock. According to the guidance, intent must be investigated by law enforcement before it can be inferred. Children playing tag at recess, a student tags another student in the chest area. A student climbing on the monkey bars reaches for a bar and touches another student on the inner thigh. A student wiping dog hair or debris off another student's backside. In all of these common incidents, intent cannot be inferred when a student touches another student's intimate part. It must be investigated. We have reviewed our practice, we've reviewed the policy and the statute, And at this time, our administration is not recommending this change to our sexual assault violation. The Student Code of Conduct is not intended as an adaptation of criminal or civil codes for our children in schools. It is not intended to codify every potential behavior situation, nor is it policy to determine the appropriate or inappropriate behaviors or actions of our staff or administration. It is a tool to communicate to our students and their families, in fact, to all of our stakeholders, that we have rules to guide our behavior expectations for students in the learning environments, and that there are responses for violations to these expectations. It is also a guideline for our administrators when responding to student behavior incidents. Our responses are intended to teach and to reinforce appropriate behaviors to support children in academic learning environments and into support of their growth and their development. Therefore, tonight, we ask the board to adopt the 2020-21 Student Code of Conduct draft as submitted to you this evening. And at the same time, considering the timeline for preparing the code for the start of an earlier school year, we request waiving the final reading. Thank you.
Okay. We'll open up for questions. Mrs. Cracky.
I'm sorry, I did not understand what you said in the last sentence or two.
That I was asking for the board action in adopting the code of conduct, and at the same time to allow us to have the code prepared and ready for the start of the year, waiving the second reading.
Okay, and maybe the start of the school year is yet to be determined, so that might give you more time. I don't know. Just a thought.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Mrs. Gotti.
So first of all, I want to thank you for the adjustment to selling, distributing, intent to distribute on the alcoholic beverages and controlled and imitation controlled substances. I truly believe that anyone who has the intent of selling and distributing that could be profiting from someone else becoming injured, assaulted, or killed would be a horrible thing. So I thank you for changing that. Down on page 28 where you referenced, and I need to get there, so I'm assuming drugs, the reason you removed it was because controlled substances and imitation substances, it's duplicity, is that why?
Yes, because we were actually, through the discussion and the recommendation of the board, and we talked about it being a teaching, there is no doubt about referring, I believe it was heroin and methamphetamines to law enforcement. So yes, we will still take a teaching approach if there is an Advil or a Tylenol, and it is not considered a controlled substance.
Perfect, and I think that's important. So I have a question on page 28 because it talked about more than for a personal use. So my question simply is, if I have heroin in my backpack and it's just enough for me personally, do you not, and this has always been there and I just never have paid attention to it, do we not contact law enforcement? Do you get supports for me? Do I get counseling? What happens? Because if I just have enough for me, I'm curious.
If a student is found to be in possession of heroin, regardless of the amount, it is referred to law enforcement.
So how do we know that from this language?
So we have had students that have had prescription medication that has been prescribed to them, and that is their personal use.
So personal use as defined in this means a prescription for that individual.
Sorry, I just want to read the direct reference so I make sure I'm commenting. A person –
possession of quantities of prohibited substances greater than those reasonably considered for personal use. So, but if I have just had my wisdom teeth out and I have a whole bottle full of Oxycontin, are you going to be, what do you do in those situations? I guess, because that would be prescribed to me, but it's more than what I need for that day in school.
When a student is prescribed medication that they must take during the school day, it is to go through the nurse's office. However, a student walking into the building hasn't made it to the nurse's office yet with their prescription, we would work with those students in that situation.
I'm just thinking maybe we should tighten up the wording around that at some point. If we're referring to personal use as those, because you're definitely referring to it as a prescription.
If we have a controlled substance, and yes, we will take that back and we will look at tightening that up in next year when we have our full committee to look specifically. But at this point, we are talking about any controlled substances, which would be controlled by prescription, that if a student is found in possession of those or distributing those, that it would be contact to law enforcement.
Okay, I just think we need to maybe think about that for next year, because I think there's some difference between prescription that a kid has in their backpack and an illegal substance, which are two totally different things.
Yes, and I believe a prescription qualifies it as a controlled substance then.
Right, exactly.
But I will certainly verify that.
Okay, thank you.
McFarland, an example could be, this is an example from real life, is Ritalin. And kids having, a child could have a controlled substance for personal use and then still have an issue where we have to contact law enforcement because they could be giving it away and or selling it to another student. So,
thank you.
Right, and those are my concerns, especially if you have more than what you need for that day. And I know that is a very strong possibility that happens every day.
And again, it is also the training that we provide, that any kind of medication that a student is required to take during the day, that it is shared with the nurse and that go to the nurse's office for distribution. Thank you.
Mrs. Cracky.
Again, when you talked about entering the school with the medication and they hadn't gotten to the nurse yet, are you going to suggest the parent calls to tell them the student has that ahead of time so that they are not in jeopardy of something? Or, high school students really aren't thrilled if their mother comes to school with the bottle and gives it to the nurse. So, that little piece of time there, what are you going to do about it? Because we don't want to grab the student because they have the medication they're supposed to have. So how can we amend that or change it so that they don't get snapped up? And
it is actually in our district handbook pages for information for families about prescription medication that students are required to take during the day.
So the parent really needs to bring it to school anyway?
Yes, and
Okay.
so we include the code of conduct, which
Okay.
is our policy, in those
Okay.
school information pages as well as in the district handbook pages.
So you won't want it to be brought in, what if it's a renewal prescription? That would have to go through somebody too, if the student had that in the backpack to take you to the nurse?
Yes, there is guidance provided to all of
For
our
the
families
renewal.
about taking any medication at school.
I know, but I want to be sure that they're not abusing that or doing the wrong thing so that they don't get in trouble about this. Do you think that's clear?
I do, and it is
Okay.
certainly part of the training that we do at the beginning of the year with students when we go
Okay.
over the district handbook, the information pages, and the student code of
Okay.
conduct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? This is an action on Mr. Perlman.
Thank you. As I think the only person in this room who prosecutes people for sexual assault, I have a lot of problems with what we're about to do here. Let me start on page 28 at the very bottom. Sexual assault in the first or second degree is defined in Nebraska statutes 28.319 through 28.320.01. Here's where one of the big problems comes up, because this is the next sentence. Sexually assaulting or attempting to sexually assault any person if a complaint has been filed by a prosecutor in a court. We can stop right there, because what this says is that even if it's first or second degree sexual assault, it doesn't need to be reported unless and until a complaint has been filed by a prosecutor in a court. So that's probably not the intent, but that's what it says. On the top of page 29, sexually assaulting or attempting to sexually assault any person if a complaint has been filed. Further, if a student is under the age of 18, what you're going to see is not a complaint. That doesn't happen in juvenile court. So, again, under this, you wouldn't even ever have to report, other than the fact that everyone is a mandatory reporter.
So, Mr. Perlman, not all incidents of sexual assault occur at school, and so I believe this is stipulating that if there are some circumstances outside of school and that it is in the courts and we are made aware of that, that we will certainly also apply the guidelines of our student code of conduct. So, for example, a student who something happens and it's another student in the school and it happens on the weekend outside of the school is made aware of that complaint, then we would go ahead and take actions to make sure that all students are safe.
And I appreciate that, but that's not what this says. That's the next paragraph. This, as it's written, says sexually assaulting or attempting to sexually assault any person if a complaint has been filed is a violation of the student code of conduct. Another way of saying that is sexually assaulting or attempting to sexually assault any person is not a violation of the code of conduct if a complaint has not been filed. And that's a problem because, again, when we're talking about children committing sexual assault, a complaint a lot of times is not going to be filed. But there's just some other things. When an argument, when one resorts to the absurd end of hypotheticals to justify not reporting sexual assault, that's a problem.
Mr. Perlman, this is not about the adult or the adult behavior of reporting or not reporting sexual behavior. This is about our student code of conduct, and it is about the behavior and how we respond to the behavior of our students, whether they are in school or outside of school, and the nexus is brought to the school.
Well, it is more than that, because the whole document talks about contacting law enforcement. And so, in the history of the world, nobody's been prosecuted for sexual assault for smacking a butt after a slam dunk. That's absurd. I've had cases where men or young men have grabbed the breasts of a young woman and claimed it was a joke. And we've actually gone to trial, and the defense is it was a joke. We can't ask our teachers and staff to be the gatekeeper of reporting sexual assault. That is illegal under the mandatory reporting law.
Mr. Perlman, the example that you just gave of a child reporting that someone grabbed their breast would not be ignored by the staff of the Omaha Public Schools. No, I don't know any staff member where a child would report that and would say whether the person said it was not. They're required to report it as mandatory reporters because they are children, and because of the nature of it, that is something that would be reported by our teachers. They don't need. They have excellent judgment for the most part. I would say 99.999 have excellent judgment, and that would be something that would be reported. And what's interesting is that I understand what you're saying about unusual things, but that is the nature of school. Unusual things happen all of the time, and so the things that are mandatory reported are mandatory reports are mandatory reports. But just as you said, a person might not report smacking somebody on. That actually has happened where parents have come in and said they want somebody to call law enforcement about a child being smacked on the buttocks by another kid during a game. because the kid might have been teased by somebody else who said something about that, so it became a big thing for the child, and rightfully so. The child is feeling that way. So while it may seem absurd to you, these are things that happen to children, and depending on the circumstances and how they're feeling about it, we do have to sometimes, we are requested sometimes to report some of those things. So I understand your feelings, and I don't mean to minimize that, but one of the definitions of high school and middle school is a lot of absurd stuff that happens because we're dealing with young people and children who sometimes most of the time make fantastic choices, but every once in a while make a choice that is not a choice we wish they would make.
It is about our learning environments and teaching our students, and any student who would report feeling uncomfortable would be investigated and reported, because that is one of the very definitions, the mental trauma or personal trauma that it would cause a victim. So as Dr. Logan said, it is our training and expectation and guidance to staff to investigate, to report and have it investigated.
Maybe another way of asking the question is, why is there any gatekeeping of third-degree sexual assault?
So as cited in the example, the observed behavior, I can't assign intent to it. It must be investigated. And in the nature of our schools and the reports, we would be reporting thousands to law enforcement to come and investigate. The examples given of the basketball game with the players slapped on the buttock, that is touching an intimate part of a student. I don't know the intent. It needs to be investigated. And talking about what we are trying to provide in our schools, we will report every incident that is reported to us. But as investigating, if that's the desire of this board, then we will incorporate that and we will follow that practice, or we will follow that policy. But as we are talking about first and second, it is very clear, mandatory reporting. The investigation must be done by law enforcement.
Okay. What is, when we're talking about second-degree sexual assault, what is that?
I'm sorry?
What is second-degree sexual assault?
Second-degree sexual assault would be serious personal injury, which would mean great bodily injury or disfigurement, extreme mental anguish or mental trauma, pregnancy, disease, loss of impairment of a sexual or reproductive organ. That would be sexual assault second degree.
And are teachers and staff equipped to know when to make that call, or is that going to be screened?
Again, anytime a student reports an incident where they are uncomfortable or feel as though they have been violated on an intimate part, it is reported and investigated.
Reported to who?
Law enforcement.
But not third-degree sexual assault.
There has to be an investigation of the intent of before the action could be referred. Again, it is about the intent of the student who commits the action, not the victim.
Oh, I'm well aware of the requirements of third-degree sexual assault, but it is not okay to gatekeep by anyone. A crime of sexual assault, and it'll come up for a vote, so we will decide. But I'm telling you, all sexual assaults in OPS shall be reported. I cannot believe that we are having this debate, but I will move on to the next part of what we're talking about here. I have provided most of the board, especially those who have asked, a 2017 report by the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And I'm going to read some of that tonight because some of the there's been some changes as to mandatory reporting of code violations versus discretionary. And just from the executive summary, and this can all be found online, it's 2017 NAACP Legal Defense Fund. It's titled Locked Out of the Classroom, How Implicit Bias Contributes to Disparities in School Discipline. And from the executive summary, it says, the inclusion of discretionary offenses for which students may be suspended has disproportionately harmed black students, even though black students are not more likely to act out in school. Research has consistently established that black students do not have higher rates of misconduct than any other students. Rather, black students are disproportionately disciplined for more subjective offenses, such as disrespecting a teacher or being perceived as a threat than their white counterparts. These disparities result from and perpetuate stereotypes about black students, specifically the stereotype that they are aggressive and dangerous. We heard about that from one of the speakers, Ms. Reef, earlier today, who gave her experience, misbehaving moderately or not even to that level in school, and she saw firsthand these disproportionate impacts. And so I've talked about this every time that this has come up in front of us, and I'm not understanding why we're moving forward on, and this isn't about zero tolerance, because that doesn't work either, but when the data is clear about what happens when we just open up the code of conduct to let individual teachers, even with the best of intentions, to decide what's going to be punished and what's not. The data has been ongoing. This report cites studies that go back 46 years. And so I'm concerned about that as well. There's a lot of talk when folks are running for office about how they want to address these things, but when it comes time to make these votes, we just see something different. And so, it's important, to not only just speak about these things, but it's important when it comes time to vote on these things. And so, these things just aren't being addressed in this code. I'm sorry it came to us late, and so we're going to have a problem with the printers, but that's my issues.
Thank you, Mr. Perlman. Mrs. Goding.
So I just want to reflect on a couple things that Mr. Perlman said, because after over 7 years on this board, I know we've paid out a number of sums for, unfortunately, sexual assault, and we've had some really unfortunate situations. So what I've heard you say, Dr. McFarland, is that we will report it if a student comes to us, files a complaint, and it's been investigated, and I don't know if investigation means coming to the same place for the students.
So please let me clarify.
Yeah.
Because you referenced that there have been payments out on sexual assaults. Those are on adult behaviors, and those are not related to our student behavior. And again, Dr. Logan and Chief Wakefield, they do not consult the student code of conduct to determine how they respond to the adults, nor are the adults subject to the student code of conduct. So that's one thing. I just want to make sure that we're clear. And the second thing is, any report of a student, I am not determining whether it's sexual assault. Any student who makes a report of feeling uncomfortable being touched by another student is then reported to law enforcement and investigated. The schools do not determine whether an incident is sexual assault or not.
Right. So, I want to think about how I word this. So I know that, well, I won't go there. Why don't in the context of the language, why don't we share with students, hey, if it's a third-degree sexual assault, because it sounds pretty awful to me, a third-degree sexual assault, and I'm not talking about the slapping the kid on the butt. Why don't we include that in the code of conduct to say, hey, there's a potential here. If you do commit this sort of act, a third-degree sexual assault, we're going to investigate if it's reported to us. And, sometimes, I guess where I will go is obviously sometimes parents are included. There sometimes is a decision not to move forward with police. What are we really saying here? Are we saying to the students, we're not going to include third degree because we may investigate it and determine that it wasn't really a sexual assault? Why don't we just tell kids there's a potential if you commit a third degree sexual assault, it will be reported, and
So-
maybe you don't have to worry about the behaviors. I guess I'm just trying to figure that out.
When we distribute the student code of conduct to students and we go through it, we do go through this as well as the handbook. We also talk about sexual harassment. We also talk about a variety of the rules and expectations in our district handbook. And again, our student code of conduct really is a teaching tool to say that we have rules. It is not to teach specifically about all legal violations, state statutes. It is to say that we have these at the same time that we are constantly reinforcing and teaching with students when we talk about bullying, we talk about harassment, we define them of a sexual nature, whether it's related to any of our age, gender. So it is part of our ongoing teaching with students, and it is also part of what we reinforce with our behavior expectations through our MTSSB process with students.
But if it's in writing and the student signs off on it, doesn't that make it more concrete for that student to say, I probably shouldn't grab the student's breast in class and then say, oops, sorry, it was just an accident? I mean, if we put it here in writing, doesn't that, I guess, I don't have girls, I have boys, but I feel for some of my friends who have girls in school, and I get really concerned about when we're not telling another student in writing, this could be a problem for you, so don't do it.
Yes, we do that with our code of conduct to tell students that yes, we have rules. Yes, there are also state statutes beyond our school rules, and that yes, there are expectations that we have in the school. And we continue to teach young people as they developed those appropriate ways through our curriculum, through our activities, through our clubs, and it is just one more tool that we use to teach students and reinforce those desired behaviors for the academic learning environments.
Thank you. Any other questions? This is an action item. I believe Dr. McFarland and staff have been working on this for several months with the board. This is, I believe, the third time that you've been in front of us. They are recommending to approve the first reading and waive the second reading. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the first reading and waive the second reading of the 2020-2021 Student Code of Conduct.
So moved.
There's a motion by Mr. Smith. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Ryan. Any other discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Perlman.
If there's any staff here in 2013, can we remind the board members who weren't here in 2013 what happened at Belvedere Elementary School?
What does that have to do with the
Because
motion?
3 students sexually assaulted another student and OPS failed to report it right away. So that's what we're talking about here right now.
2013.
Yep, 2013.
I'm sorry, I'm unaware of that situation.
I am unaware of that situation as well.
Okay. Well, you should read up on that because that's third-degree sexual assault.
Mrs. Godding.
Thank you so much for reminding me of that, because that was a very serious situation. It was not good, and we had it was a terrible situation, and it was well publicized in the newspaper. So thank you for bringing that up. I will be voting no, because I believe that third-degree sexual assault should be in writing. The students should sign off on it and say, this is something that I now know I shouldn't do, not just that I've been told in a class that maybe I didn't even go to that class that day in here. And so that was a horrible situation. And
It sounds like that was a failure on an adult's part in reporting.
Correct. It doesn't really matter, because it wasn't, I mean, yeah, there were a whole lot of problems that came with the Belvedere situation, but I can't tell parents in this district that I'm okay not including that component, because Mr. Perlman is right. I knew there was something, and I appreciate him bringing that up.
Thank you. Mr. Perlman.
And under this code that y'all are about to pass, it will not need to be reported.
Aren't teachers the mandatory reporters, correct?
All staff in Omaha Public Schools, all 9,000 are mandatory reporters.
And then those were some changes that were made this past year with some additional training and those
No,
kind of things?
that's been the model since, there's been the purpose of the district since, and then when Dr. Logan came on, we added additional training after recent incidences as well.
Okay.
Mr. Perlman.
But it's the details that are important. Mandatory reporting of what? And what this code does is not require reporting of third-degree sexual assault. And let me just say something else. I mean, we can sit here and say that, you know, sure, if a young man grabs a young lady's chest, it will be reported. But that too is fact specific, because you could have a young man say that he was just passing her in the hallway, and then I guess the principal will be the gatekeeper of whether or not that young man's intent was this or that, and we just can't do that, and it's just wrong. Actually, it's just wrong.
No, Mr. Storer, this is a closed meeting held in public. Any other discussion? Mr. Ray, roll call, please.
Ryan?
No.
Smith?
Aye.
Snipe?
No.
Snope?
Aye.
Cassidy?
Aye.
Gadding?
No.
Hallman?
No.
Cracky?
No.
Perlman?
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. McFarland, sorry. When do we need to approve the new student code of conduct?
Before the start of the school year.
When's the start of the school year? August 11th. So
11th.
we have one meeting, which is August 3rd to approve the new code?
And then we would need to have it
Printed and
prepared,
ready by the
formatted.
students?
Yes.
That probably won't happen, would it?
We will work with our district staff.
Do we, Ms. Niels-Brash, real quick, if we do not approve the new code by time the start of the school year, are we still operating on the past code of conduct?
Yeah.
We're operating under the past code of conduct, so that old code of conduct that is currently in board policy, it's retains the same thing, retains policy, continues on, just like any other policy of the district. Until you change it, it's the same policy that you continue to have. So it's part of the 5,000 series, don't remember exactly number, but it's part of the student code of conduct, correct?
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All righty, moving on to item I-1B, approval of consulting services agreement with Omaha Public School and Prism Advisors. I believe this was an item on the consent agenda pulled by Mr. Perlman. The floor is yours.
I should keep my mask on. So this is Linda Richards, right? Is that right?
Prism Advisors, I believe, yes.
Okay. I think I said this last time the contract came up. I have as much respect for Linda Richards as anyone I've met in my time during the service on the school board. So this isn't about her. I just need to make that as clear as I can make it, as much as I did last time. I just have some questions about what metrics are being used and it's not that we need to micromanage and do an evaluation on Ms. Richards, but what metrics are we looking for? What outcomes are we seeking? And obviously with the pandemic, I'm wondering, what has changed, if anything, over the last 6 months about how we're approaching things.
Are you talking about the BTC?
Correct, because that's the role, right, as a facilitator?
BTC, and I think there's some other things allotted to that. We haven't met since spring break, since February was the last meeting because of the COVID situation.
Okay. So do we have any metrics or something like that of which we can, gauge the efficacy of this approach?
Mr. Perlman, thank you for your question. I think that, I know that Mrs. Richards continues to meet with legislators. She also has recently met with a newly appointed trustee, former Senator Bourne, who is a new trustee for OSERS, and the goal is to reconvene after school opens, hopefully in early September. We want to be able to get August going. The goal is to be prepared, quite frankly, for the next legislative session. We know that this one will be short, just a few days, maybe 17 days, I believe is how many days they have left. And we will need to be prepared for the long session, which will happen starting in January. And so the goal is to reconvene the group. We have almost all repeating folks on the group. Board members are always invited to participate in the Better Together Coalition as long as we don't get to a quorum of board members. You're always welcome. You're always welcome to call Mrs. Richards if you have input to move forward. The most important metric was first and foremost was forming, quite honestly, and to keep all the players at the table, which include the school district, the school administration, the school board, the OSERS, representatives from the OSERS board, and representatives from all of our bargaining units, SEIU, OEA, and OSAA as our largest bargaining units, and to keep everybody at the table talking towards a solution. This, as you know, we modeled this work after the work in Minnesota. We're using their playbook almost exactly. And how they formed. It did take them 5 years to get to the first resolution for their pension system, and then they had to come back to the table a few years later for another fix to their system. In addition, monitoring the returns and those kinds of things, those things that you all have access to as well, that we send you, through the weekly updates and so on and so forth. So those are the things that we are measuring the progress against. I know that she provides a detailed update to you when there's one available, and the last one was that we are currently not meeting because we were in the middle of a school brick and mortar closure, and so those are the kinds of things that we are measuring. If there are other things that you would like to see, we would love to have your suggestions, and we will move forward on that. And I believe you may have come to at least one of the meetings. They're policy meetings. They're very slow to get to some resolution. The first resolution was changing the amortization, basically, to use a word that's more familiar to folks rather than some of the technical pension language, to make the payment, to make sure that the ARC payments were something that were going to be feasible for the school district, and to finally get to a piece of legislation that we had ready to present. Had many people work on those pieces of legislation, to include the members of the team, the actuary who helped us with some of the actuarial studies, and then to work with Senator Coltman and his team about things that could potentially move forward. As we all know, the legislative session ended abruptly, and there were a lot of other legislative priorities, such as property tax reduction and LB 720, the business incentive that kind of have been ruling the day and are priorities for our legislators at this time. And this continues to be a priority for Senator Coltman. My last conversation with him was several months ago. He did send me a message via Mrs. Richards to let me know that this is not something that he's put on the complete back burner, but looking forward to working with him should he be as he continues being the retirement committee chair. I hope that answers some of your questions, but that is the work. It's really legislative and working with our team to make sure that we can put forth proposals so that we have a healthy pension system moving forward. We can't stop working on it, unfortunately.
No, I agree. I appreciate that. That helps. I think Ms. Richards is perfect for that role. I would just encourage the board to just keep playing an active role moving forward. And I think that the summaries and the minutes and updates that I got just didn't seem consistent. And I'm not sure where the break in the communication was. I'm not sure it was on Ms. Richards' part, but just as soon as there's any action on any of that stuff, I think it would be great for the board to know so they can be a part of the policy decisions on what steps can be done that work out best for all sides. That's all.
And if anybody wants to replace me in those meetings, you're more than welcome to. The meetings are on Thursdays. I think they meet at 4 o'clock usually.
They're on Mondays before
right,
the board meeting.
Before the board meeting. So I would happily step down and allow anybody else to take that. Mrs. Godding.
Can you tell us roughly how much we have paid so far? Because we've been in the contract for a year, correct? Is that what it... I don't even feel like it's been a year. Why are we renewing it now? I guess I'm a little confused. Because I thought it was last fall.
It's been, I believe it's been a year. Mrs. Neal's crash. This is year 2.
So, first year we thought this was going to take a year, and obviously took longer than that. So that was below the maximum amount approved by the board. So that was 2 years ago. Then last year you approved the contract, and then this year you're approving for the following year. So we've done 2 years. We're going into year 3.
And how much have we spent in that time period?
$48,000 per year.
So we did spend the full amount?
Correct.
So, and Linda is a friend of mine, so this is nothing against Linda. I think she does a great job. She's done a great job on the Ralston School Board for years and years. But I just think it's a lot of money, and we've not really made any progress, and we didn't get any legislation introduced this year. We've got lobbyists, we've got the superintendent to visit with, Senator Coulterman. So I'm going to vote no just because I feel like it's a lot of money to spend, and we haven't really we haven't gotten someplace where I think we're ready to have something big happen. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Mrs. Godding. So far we have spent 1/5 of what Minnesota spent. So we are not spending, I would respectfully disagree with the amount that's spent, and considering that's $1 billion pension liability. And prior to my arrival here, there was no effort that was being made to work on this situation that had produced any legislation. We did get some action. We did produce a bill to move forward. I know that there was the effort around the pension bond that did not move forward, but at this time an aggressive effort is going to be needed where we have someone who is highly respected by the legislature and can move it forward on behalf of the district. Yes, we do have a superintendent also leading during a pandemic, so trying to, and even when it wasn't a pandemic, managing all the other things that we manage. It is very unusual for a superintendent to not just run a school district, but also to be in charge of a pension system. There's only 2 others, I believe, in the country that do that work.
I agree. That is highly unusual, and that's a tough thing to come into. But I would disagree with you on the work that has been done, because had we not done the work that we did, we wouldn't have the investments in Lincoln. We did a ton of work on trying to get the bond. So there has been a tremendous amount of work done in the past. I don't think we can say there hasn't been. I certainly spent about 5 years on this board working heavily toward that, and I don't want to take away from that. So, and all the people who committed to that work and the legislators who moved things forward. So I just am going to vote no, because I think maybe, I'm not sure that this is, I don't know if this is the right direction or not. So
Thank you. So colleagues, just to let you know, the BTC did practically write a bill and came up with a plan that was submitted to Senator Coulterman. And I believe it was going to have our pension plan 100% fully funded by 2046 or 47. That's in our lifetime. And I believe the money is worth it. So I will leave it with that, and I will entertain a motion to approve item I-1B.
So moved.
There's a motion by Ms. Ryan, second by Dr. Holman. Any other discussion? Mr. Perlman.
So, through the work from the Better Together Coalition, a bill was drafted. Is that correct? Okay. And it was submitted to lawmakers, and we have lobbyists down in the legislature. Seems like the Better Together Coalition has gotten its work done, or no?
Typically, when you create an organization like that, the work's not done until you've passed that legislation. Because if it fails, then they have to go back and do something else and come up with something else to present to that senator. And then also, if it does fail, Senator Coulterman's term down in 2 years, so they have to find a new senator to carry that bill or idea. Senator Coulterman and Senator Vargas and I believe Senator Lindstrom were the three senators that we've been working with over several years. 2 of them are termed out in 2022. So this coalition will have to educate more senators if we can't get it done within the next session. If that makes any sense.
Okay.
Roll call, please.
Smith.
Aye.
Snipe.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Goding.
no.
Holman.
Aye.
Cracky.
Aye.
Perlman.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
8 ayes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item I-1C. Who was this pulled? I believe.
Mr. Perlman.
Mr. Perlman. The floor is yours.
Okay. This would be K-12 incorporated curriculum. Is that right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to vote no for this. I oppose charter schools and education management organizations which run the charter schools at pretty much every turn I can. I think that OPS has a great curriculum department that after, what are we in, year 6 of the virtual school, should be creating the curriculum for the virtual school. What is this? This is what? Oh, a little bit more than $500,000. About right. Yep, $516,000. I mean, if it was most virtual, or not most virtual, but a company like K-12, leaving aside the what's the word I'm looking for? The genesis of K-12 and one of the most notorious criminals in American history, Michael Milken, leaving that aside because he was pardoned by the president 4 months ago for his crimes that he committed in the 80s and 90s. But leaving Michael Milken aside, I think that OPS should be developing OPS curriculum and not giving money to private companies to develop it. Because out of this $516,000, we don't know what K-12 is going to do with it. We don't know how much money they're going to spend on lobbying for charter schools or tax credit vouchers in Nebraska with this money. And so it's just not a good idea in my humble opinion. So,
Thank you. Mrs. Godding.
So I actually was part of the board that brought K-12 and virtual schools to the district. And I think it's been a great option for parents. The one thing that I did ask Mr. Ray and